Martin's research broadly explores how culture, anthropology, neurobiology, philosophy, and psychology impact the interplay between neurobiological processes and culture in hallucinogenic experiences. His main fieldwork is located in Shipibo communities of the Middle Ucayali in the Peruvian Amazon. Martin Fortier. Amazing.
So I'm going first to define, so I'm going to talk today about the sense of reality in hallucinogenic experiences. And I will first define what I mean by the sense of reality. So let's say you are, crossing a street and a car, comes at full throttle, and you jump very quickly on the pavement. So when you do that, without thinking about it, you take the car as being real, right? But without any reflective process. So it's spontaneously that you consider that the car is real. Now, contrast this with philosophers who are, reflecting for years about, wondering whether, for example, this table is real or not. So in the second case, people are, the second case illustrates a case where there is no sense of reality involved, but it's more judgment of reality. So if we consider the case of dreaming, when you are dreaming, at least when you are having a non-lucid dream, you take everything you experience as being real. So there is a sense of reality. And now there is a second kind of question, which is, when you theorize about dreaming, do you consider that, dreaming gives you access to another reality? And for example, many people in the Amazon consider that, theoretically, they consider that they can access another realm through dreaming. But this is, the reflective part. And here I'm going to consider only the non-reflective experience of how real does it feel. And there, there can be dissociations between the two levels. That is, everyone experiences dreams as being real, but then some people say, actually it's only about neurons firing in the brain, and people, for example, in the Amazon consider that there is more than that. You access another realm. And so my question today is not, that I will address, is not whether, hallucinations, when you take ayahuasca, for example, whether actually you access, another reality or not. I'm not going to talk about this theoretical question, but I'm going to talk about the phenomenology. So when you experience ayahuasca, for example, how real does it feel? Regardless of, whether you consider it to be, when you theorize about it, real or not. And so this is how I'm going to proceed. So I'm going first to present existing theories of the sense of reality. So one developed by Stephen Bayer and the other by Benny Shannon. Then I'm going to argue that the sense of reality is not unified, but is fundamentally heterogeneous. And finally, I'm going to compare two classes of hallucinogens, namely serotoninergic and anti-cholinergic hallucinogens, and look at each of these hallucinogens and see whether there is what kind of sense of reality there is in each of them. Okay, so first, existing theories of the sense of reality. So Steve Bayer, in his book, Singing to the Plants, proposes that actually psychedelic experiences feel as real as ordinary reality. And this is so because, according to him, what explains the psychological mechanism, which explains why we have this sense that things are real when we take psychedelics, is that there is some malfunctioning in reality monitoring. So what's reality monitoring? Some psychologists have proposed that the way we distinguish, so when you think of a memory, for example, you try to, you remember something, and you try to see whether you actually, experienced it or imagined it, okay, the memory that you have. And so these psychologists say that the way we distinguish between internally generated and externally generated mental states is we look at the content of these states. And for example, if there is some cognitive effort in retrieving the memory, this means that it was not made by your mind, but you really perceived the thing. And so there is this idea that there can be biases which lead you to consider that something was externally generated while in fact it was just imaging. And actually, Bayer says that this is what's going on in these experiences. And so when one, for example, hallucinates a house after having ingested ayahuasca, one's reality monitoring system evaluates the house as being externally generated exactly as it does when you perceive a house in ordinary reality. So key in Bayer's position is that the sense of reality of the house that you hallucinate with ayahuasca is exactly the same as the sense of reality of the house that you perceive in your ordinary life. Okay, so he equates the two. And I think that's quite disputable. So first, it must be said that there are problems with this. Now, psychologists and neuroscientists are being more and more skeptical about the ability of this theory of reality monitoring to explain hallucinations. But I think more deeply, what we can say is that the world of ayahuasca, for example, is very different from the ordinary world. So, for example, there is no object constancy. So very often in ayahuasca experience, objects dissolve very suddenly. This never happens, in the ordinary world. So I think the two experiences are quite different. And again, I think a real problem is that the reality monitoring theory assumes that the sense of reality that you have when you have a vision, a hallucination, is the same as the one you have when you perceive ordinary objects. And actually, Benny Shannon in his book says something which contradicts, and I think it's a very fair criticism of Bayer's position. So he writes the following. With TOI, so TOI is not a serotoninergic hallucinogen, such as ayahuasca, but is an anti-cholinergic hallucinogen. So he says, with TOI, the hallucination was completely incorporated within the perception of the external world around. I took the hallucination to be real, never suspected that it was not. With either ayahuasca, this was never the case for me. With TOI, one does not confuse the real and the non-real. With ayahuasca, one feels that one is presented with other realities, but these are not confused with the ordinary one. So the point that Shannon is making is that the reality monitoring account, which equates, ordinary perception and the, and psychedelic hallucinations, so this view is wrong because actually when you take ayahuasca, you can most of the time very well discriminate between where you are, taking ayahuasca with ordinary people, real people, and then there is this other plane that you can access. So you can discriminate between the two. And what's interesting is that with anti-cholinergic substances such as TUI, this is not the case anymore. So the reality monitoring account, so what Bayer says of ayahuasca, seems accurate only as far as anti-cholinergic substances are concerned. And so here are examples of famous psychedelic or serotoninergic plants and compounds, so such as psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, or peyote, or LSD. And on the other hand, you have these anti-cholinergic hallucinogens, the so-called deliriums, and you have, for example, brugmansia, datura, mandrake, or duboisia, which was used by Aboriginal people in Australia. And so, brugmansia and datura are called as you may know, in the Amazon, Toei. So we really have to distinguish between these two classes of substances. And so here is, for example, a report of a person who took an anti-cholinergic drug. So one moment, I would be seeing crowds of people and talking to them. This would go on for about a minute, and then I would snap back into reality and realize that I'm talking to my guitar hanging on the wall or just the wall. It seriously felt like I genuinely was with the people and the places I thought I was at. So you can see that this is very different from a psychedelic experience, because in the psychedelic experience, you can, to a certain extent at least, discriminate fairly easily between the two, between hallucinations or visions that you are having and then the ordinary world. Here, both are conflated, and the hallucinations, as Shannon notes, are often embedded or incrusted within the surrounding environment. So it's not working anymore. Okay. So this is another trip report, and it's quite similar. So it is not really a trip because you do not realize that you are hallucinating. So you take everything at face value. You also rarely remember any of the events that happened while under the influence. All I remember is that my roommate opened my door and we began talking. A short time later, I snapped out of it for a second, and I realized I was talking to a closed basket the entire time. So this is why, Bayer's view may apply to anti-cholinergic hallucinogens, but not to serotoninergic hallucinogens. So if we try to define the sense of reality of psychedelic serotoninergic hallucinogens, how are we going to do it? So here is Shannon's proposal. So actually what he says is that, it's not that you have the same sense of reality as the ordinary sense of reality that we have, but it's more like an enhanced sense of reality, so a sense of hyper-reality. So what's nice with Shannon's theory is that psychedelic experiences are characterized by a sense of hyper-reality, while deliriums, that is anti-cholinergic hallucinogens, are characterized by a sense of normal reality. So you would have ordinary reality, everyday life, there would be normal sense of reality, anti-cholinergic hallucinogens, normal sense of reality, and when you take psychedelics, it's a enhanced sense of reality, a sense of hyper-reality. So the problem, however, is that I don't think it's accurate to say that everything in these psychedelic experiences, are hyper-real. So there are, things which feel more real than usual. So, for example, effectively, these experiences are very loaded, more than usual. So, it seems fair to say that. But on the other hand, there are things which seem less real than usual. So, the example of object constancy. So things, dissolve suddenly. So, there is a sense of unreality when you experience that. And there are other things which are, it's not hyper-real, it's not hyper-real, but it's like different than, usual experience of the world. So the feeling that there are magical things that can happen. So I think in the end it's not really satisfactory to say that there is a sense of hyper-reality. Okay? And so now I will claim that actually to solve the problem, the conundrum, we have to acknowledge that the sense of reality is fundamentally heterogeneous. And I'm going to present cases of altered states of consciousness where the sense of reality is altered. And this will allow us to understand what's going on with psychedelic experiences. So there is this condition which is called derealization, and it's often related to depersonalization, in which people have a sense that things are not real anymore, are not affectively charged, so the world is very distant. And so this is, let's say, a derealized patient, and in usual life, you have the sense that things are real, and these patients, they have the sense that things are not real anymore. So they say, I feel that the world is unreal, etc. Okay. So if we look at neurobiological studies on this, what has been, there is some evidence suggesting that actually they have a limbic deficit, and for example, the amygdala is hypoactivated, and this could explain why people, feel that the world is unreal. It's because affectively, things surrounding people are not as effectively loaded as usual. And also there is this study showing that there may be a deficit of connectivity in the brain. That is, the usual intermodal binding between the sensory information, for example, is not working well. Another case of altered sense of reality is psychosis, especially early psychosis. So people report having a strange, so the world has suddenly a sense of enigma, or there is some mystery, there is some unreality, some strangeness in the world. So, this is another case where when you are experiencing early psychosis, you have the sense that things are unreal. And, studies suggest that this is caused by a predictive deficit. That is, there are several very neat electrophysiological studies showing that people cannot predict events of the world as easily as before. That is, they are surprised by unsurprising events. And on the other way around, they are not surprised when you present them where, for example, surprising sounds. And the last example I want to consider is, the opposition between lucid dreaming and non-lucid dreaming. So when you are having a lucid dream, you don't take things at face value. You know it's only fiction, right? While when you are having a non-lucid dream, you take everything at face value. So here there is a sense of reality, here no sense of reality. And it has been shown that this is, the critical assessment of what you experience and the sense that, things are not real, that you are only dreaming, depends on the activation of specific areas in the prefrontal cortex, and especially the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. So if this DLPFC is activated, then you will have a lucid dream. And if it's not, then you won't be having a lucid dream, and as a result, you will have the sense that things are real. Okay? So here is a summary of what I've presented, and the key idea is that the sense of reality is not homogeneous. Okay, there are different components, different neurocognitive mechanisms leading to this sense that things are real. And so not only neurocognitive mechanisms, but also different experiences. So for example, the affective load of the world is responsible for the sense that things are real. But it can be also the DLPFC, like what I call the apodictic sense of reality depends on the DLPFC. So if you are dreaming, the DLPFC is activated, then you will have a lucid dream because you will recognize things that are happening in the dream as fictions, are things which are not real. And so the question is, now that I've distinguished between different kinds of the sense of reality, how does it work in the serotoninergic hallucinogens and the anti-cholinergic hallucinogens? So if we look at the affective sense of reality, studies suggest that actually, as far as psychedelics are concerned, there is an increased affective sense of reality. So for example, I was talking about the paralimbic areas which are hypoactivated with derealization. Okay, so here it's hypoactivated. In normal reality, it's just normal, and then here, when you take psychedelics such as ayahuasca, it's hyperactivated. So you have a sense of enhanced reality. So that would be consistent with what Shannon says. So what about the sense of, the integrative sense of reality, which is, as I have shown, decreased in derealization? So here again, studies suggest that actually the integration between the different areas and networks between the brain is increased with psychedelics. That is, they allow different networks to communicate, while usually these networks don't communicate with each other. And it's interesting to note, so that there are so these are studies with psychedelics. We don't have studies with, properly speaking, anti-cholinergic hallucinogens, but anti-cholinergic hallucinogens, they induce a decrease in acetylcholine, and this cholinergic deficit is also observed in neurodegenerative disease. And so it has been shown that Alzheimer's disease, for example, correspond to a disconnection, okay, so decreased sense of integrative sense of reality. So this is what you have. And finally, if we look at before the last one, so predictive sense of reality, actually it is decreased with psychedelics. That is, as in the case of psychosis, people have a hard time predicting what's going to happen. Okay, so there is a decreased sense of reality related to prediction. While with anti-cholinergic hallucinogens, it remains the same. Okay, so decrease in psychosis, psychedelics, the same, anti-cholinergic. And then the apodictic sense of reality. So basically, the idea is that lucid dreaming, you have the sense that it's unreal because the DLPFC is, strongly activated. Anti-cholinergic, there is a strong deactivation of prefrontal areas, and especially DLPFC, and as a result, you take everything at face value, as in non-lucid dreaming. And psychedelics, it's more or less, it's in between real and unreal. And so to conclude, you can see that for, each of these substances, the sense of reality is heterogeneous. There are some things which are hyper-real, other, hyper-real. So this is just a summary of what I've just said. And just to conclude, I want to say that I'm a member of this research group. And we have a bulletin with, so we interview researchers who are studying on altered states of consciousness. And finally, here are 2 articles, forthcoming articles, developing in more details what I've been presenting today. Thank you. Yeah.
Are there any questions? Is this on? Yep.
Hello, thank you for that. Question, how does this inform integration?
Well, I think that in the integrative process, the theoretical level that I haven't been talking about plays a very important role. So I think this helps us understand what's going on in the experience. But the question of, integrating the experience requires to take into account the theoretical level. So how you judge that things are real and not, or not, and not only, how you experience things to be real when you are under the effect of the substance. But I would be interested, if you have any clue as to how it can help. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, you talked about derealization being described as predictive deficit.
Oh, that's psychosis. Derealization,
psychosis.
It's a limbic deficit and a connectivity deficit between the areas and networks in the brain.
Okay, so specifically then in lucid dreaming, there's no sense of predictive deficit. This is a...
No, in lucid dreaming, when I referred to lucid dreaming, I was specifically looking at the role the DLPFC plays in the sense of unreality that you have in lucid dreaming. Because the DLPFC detects incoherence in your experience, incongruencies.
Hi. Thanks for defining the different roles of the anticholinergic and the serotonergic. I'm not sure of what you limit the study to, but have you looked into the method of tobacco with anticholinergic activity within the nervous system, and specifically tobacco diet does within the vegetalismo practice?
So tobacco is, increases I have to finish. But okay, tobacco is not an anticholinergic substance. On the contrary, it increases concentration in acetylcholine, right? So there are other substances I haven't talked about, like salvia, etc. And I would like to do this, investigate this later on.
Thank you, Martin.